I mean, you had a little bit of an MMA fight. You know what it's like.
Not really.
Yeah, you did. It was a fight.
It was a fight against another comedian.
You beat a comedian up. It was very impressive.
But
it was.
He had a Taekwondo black belt from when he was 14 years old.
I need to take that back.
No, I now have a Taekwondo black belt.
No, people forget how to do shit, man. If you all bullshit aside,
Yeah.
But they also gave out a lot of Taekwondo black belts that are 100% horseshit.
Of course, it's part of the business. If you're not giving your belts out, you're not going to get people to come back.
Dude, I know a lot of people that were like, my son's 9 years old and he just got his black belt. I went like, oh. What are you even saying?
I will beat the shit out of that kid.
Everyone
right now.
will. That's the problem. Like, even other 9-year-olds will.
Yeah.
Like most
just an actual tough, athletic kid who's
a mean kid
who's not afraid of getting hit. That's a difference between kids who will do karate and kick a board. Yeah. There's also the kids that are just from the hood that have been being punched in the face by their uncles and fathers since they were a baby, and they are just ready to fight. And they're being hit to them. It's like you get desensitized to it if you do any sort of training or if you have a really tough environment, you actually get desensitized to it, and you realize after being hit a few times that once adrenaline kicks in, it doesn't really hurt. It hurts after the fact. But so I think you have those kids that will just wreck their shit. Just a little 9-year-old from the hood that's a tough kid.
Kids that grow up around violence. If you get in street fights all the time, if you're around other kids getting in street fights, people show you how to do things, you learn things. There's a lot of kids that are 10, 11 years old that live in poor neighborhoods, whether it's South Boston or, South Side of Chicago, whatever, any dangerous neighborhood that's like filled with poverty. Those kids will be more apt to succeed in fights.
Yeah.
They understand how to fight
They'll
better.
pull the trigger. They're not going to be... That's really the thing.
They're going to know they have to pull the trigger because people will pull the trigger on them. Whereas, there's a lot of people that talk a lot of shit, but they never really pull the trigger.
Well, you see those guys. Those are the guys who
when I say pull the trigger, obviously I mean punch someone. I don't mean actually pull the trigger.
You said Chicago. So
well, even anywhere. I mean, it's like... Especially after that Nipsey Hussle guy got killed. Like,
that's crazy.
That's so sad.
Yeah. On video, too, they have the fucked up... I'm not a hip-hop fan at all, but apparently it was very positive, like anti-violence. Like it wasn't like a thuggy rapper that was promoting, drug dealing and gang violence, which I don't really know if even people do that as much anymore.
I don't know. But by all accounts, this guy was loved. Yeah. And, he just... It's... just beyond fucked. Just like that is still going on in this world.
It was, if I'm not mistaken, he got into a fight with a guy, right? And the guy came back with a gun.
I don't know. And
shot him. That's what I read. I think it was like I don't know if it was
along those lines. Something along those lines.
Because when you hear about a hip hop artist gunned down, you're like, oh, is this some long-standing beef? And who knows? But I think it was literally a fight that these guys got in, and the guy came back with a gun and just fucking started unloading, which is it's brutal. That's literally how my father died. Literally, well, except with a knife, which is a much more hardcore way to do it. But my dad was outside of a strip club at 4 o'clock in the morning, got into an argument with a kid, like a 16-year-old kid, and they got into a fist fight. The kid came back like an hour later with a kitchen knife and stabbed him. That's that. And it's like, God, it also takes a different type of person to kill. I'm not the kid in the hood who's just ready to pull the trigger and punch somebody. Like I'm not. I grew up in a weird way where it's like I was taught like, well, you wait till they throw the first punch, which is a terrible strategy. But that's sort of the way that it was always like fist fights in the parking lot with your friends. You weren't trying to really hurt each other. It was you got into an argument over a video game and you went out back in the parking lot and you beat each other up for 2 minutes and then that was that. But guys that are willing to kill somebody over whatever, just an argument, take their life completely without any, just even, they lose sense of the repercussions of it as well, which is sort of like, that's something that I think would separate most people and go like, all right, well, I don't want to go to jail. There's cameras.
I think a giant chunk of it is how what experiences they have growing up. Like what happens to them? Are they abused? Are they beaten? Are they around a lot of violence? Like what are they exposed to? And then how much more likely are you to commit that violence?
To push that onto the next person.
That's really what it is. I mean, that's the vast majority. I mean, it's not a shocker that so much violent crime comes from poor neighborhoods. It's like it makes itself. It makes itself.
Of course.
It's almost like a virus.
I agree. And I grew up, my mom was extremely abusive. you know, and I grew up with around a ton of violence, a ton of physical and emotional abuse, verbal abuse, always the threat of violence. At the drop of a hat, it was always immediately to, I'll beat the shit out of you if you don't do what I say.
Right.
Even if she wasn't being violent. And I go the opposite, dude. You know, with my son, dude, literally my son, I've never even spanked him. I've never smacked him on the hand. I've never even really yelled at my son. And I don't think that I got lucky and have a good kid. I have a great kid, but I think it's a direct, you know, correlation to me not being aggressive with him.
Right.
At all.
Right. Yeah.
And I talk.
Talking is huge, right? Have little conversations with them. Don't just tell them what to do. Ask
Well, you have
them
to
how
give them
they're
a why.
feeling. Yeah.
You have to give them the why. If they don't understand why, you know, that just in general in life, people just in general, if they understand why something, there's a real purpose there, and then they do what they're doing, you know, with that purpose in mind.
Yeah.
And I think when little kids, they're so malleable, and sometimes it's annoying for them to ask why 2 or 3 times, and it's easy to lose your patience. But what you realize, that's, I'm a piece of shit. I'll admit, I'm the first one to admit it. But the only good thing I do, I think, is the fact that I'm creating this good little person. He's a really good, sweet person that I think is going to be, all the shit that I didn't really have, or, all the good qualities that I think I could have maybe had if I was raised the right way, I'm trying to give my son. And I think that's a really big responsibility. And that's why, I feel bad when you see like real violence like that, like fucking people that are like being really, you're like, dude, I know that person experienced some crazy shit.
100%.
And it's not their fault in a weird way.
And it's definitely not. I never lived in the worst neighborhood in the world, but I lived in a shady one for quite a bit. We lived in this place called Jamaica Plain, outside of Boston for about a year. My parents knew immediately we had to get the fuck out of there. I think we stayed maybe a little over a year. And we got out of there as quick as we can, but there was like a lot of break-ins, it was lower income. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't like gang violence, shoot 'em up type shit, but there was a lot of criminals. There's a lot of shady shit.
Shitty
fights.
poverty. It doesn't have to be like gangs. It's just shitty. Dude, poverty makes people do crazy shit.
It does, and it makes. I was never around kids that were that aggressive. Like kids were always trying to fight me, and I just moved there. We just moved there from Florida. And I was like, fuck, I got to get out of here. And this is what led me to martial arts.
How old
really.
were you?
13.
Okay.